The castle maid. Arya wiped the sweat from her forehead as she scrubbed the marble floors of the grand hallway. Her hands were red and raw from years of cleaning, washing, and serving the royal family of Eldon Moor. At 22 years old, she had spent the last 15 years within these castle walls, ever since the night she was found as a child, alone and trembling at the castle gates with no memory of where she came from. The other servants whispered about her strange violet eyes and the unusual silver pendant she wore around her neck, the only possession from her mysterious past. But Arya had learned long ago to keep her head down and her mouth shut. In the castle hierarchy, she was nothing more than a shadow, invisible to the nobles who walked these halls. Yet there was one person who had once seen her as more than just a servant. A friendship forgotten. Prince Marcus had been her secret friend when they were children. Back then, before he understood the weight of his royal blood, he would sneak away from his tutors to find her in the gardens. They would talk for hours, sharing dreams and laughter beneath the old oak tree. He promised her that one day, when he became king, things would be different. He promised he would never forget her. But promises made by children rarely survive the cruelty of the real world. As Marcus grew older, the distance between them widened like an endless chasm. He stopped visiting the gardens. He stopped seeing her at all. And when their paths crossed in the castle corridors, his eyes would slide past her as if she were merely another piece of furniture. Arya told herself she understood. He was a prince, destined for greatness. She was nobody, a girl without a past or future. But understanding didn't make the pain any less sharp. The engagement ceremony. The castle buzzed with excitement as preparations were made for Prince Marcus's engagement ceremony. He was to marry Lady Victoria Ashford, daughter of the Duke of Winterhaven, a woman of impeccable breeding, stunning beauty, and ruthless ambition. The entire kingdom had been invited to witness the union that would strengthen the realm's political alliances. Arya was assigned to serve during the ceremony, carrying trays of champagne and ensuring the noble guests wanted for nothing. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, unnoticed and unimportant. The grand ballroom glittered with 1,000 candles. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the polished floor. Musicians played a waltz as elegantly dressed nobles swirled in a sea of silk and jewels. At the center of it all stood Prince Marcus, devastatingly handsome in his royal blue uniform, his dark hair perfectly styled, his green eyes scanning the crowd with practiced charm. Beside him stood Lady Victoria, draped in a gown of pure white embroidered with golden thread. Her auburn hair was piled high, adorned with diamonds that caught the light with every movement. She was perfection incarnate, everything a future queen should be. Arya felt her heart crack just a little more. The cruel awakening. As Arya moved through the crowd with her tray, she didn't notice the wet patch on the floor until it was too late. Her foot slipped, and she stumbled forward, the tray flying from her hands. Time seemed to slow as glasses shattered against the marble floor, champagne spraying across the polished surface in golden arcs. The music stopped. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward her. Arya's face burned with humiliation as she dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather the broken glass with her bare hands. Blood welled from a cut on her palm, mixing with the spilled champagne. How clumsy, Lady Victoria's voice rang out, dripping with disdain. Really, Marcus, must we employ such incompetent servants? This is an embarrassment to the crown. Arya kept her head down, her hands shaking as she continued cleaning. She prayed for the ground to swallow her whole. Guards, Victoria commanded, snapping her fingers. Remove this creature from my sight. She's ruining my engagement party. 2 guards stepped forward, their hands reaching for Arya's arms. But before they could touch her, a familiar voice cut through the air. Wait. Arya's heart stopped. She looked up slowly, meeting Prince Marcus's gaze for the first time in years. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, recognition, perhaps even regret. But then his expression hardened, transforming into cold indifference. I know you, Marcus said quietly, taking a step closer. The entire ballroom fell silent, straining to hear his words. You're the maid who's been here since we were children. Hope bloomed in Arya's chest like a fragile flower. He remembered. After all these years, he remembered. Yes, Your Highness, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm Arya. We used to. You used to serve my family, Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. And now you've disrupted the most important night of my life with your carelessness. The hope in Arya's chest withered and died. Victoria stepped forward, linking her arm possessively through Marcus's. Darling, surely such a clumsy servant doesn't deserve to remain in the castle. She could cause real damage next time. Marcus looked down at Arya, and in that moment, she saw the truth written clearly in his eyes. He did remember their childhood friendship. He remembered every promise, every laugh, every moment they had shared. But he was choosing to erase it all, to pretend it had never mattered. Because she didn't matter. Not compared to his duty, his crown, his perfect noble bride. You're dismissed, Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion. Pack your belongings and leave the castle by morning. There's no place here for those who cannot perform their duties adequately. The words hit Arya like physical blows. Around her, the nobles murmured and laughed, amused by the entertainment this pathetic maid had provided. Please, Arya heard herself say, hating the desperation in her voice. I've served faithfully for 15 years. I have nowhere else to go. That's not my concern, Marcus replied, turning away from her. Victoria is right. You're an embarrassment. Guards, escort her out. The breaking point. Arya's small room in the servants' quarters had never felt more like a prison. She sat on her narrow bed, staring at the few possessions she had accumulated over the years, a worn dress, a few books borrowed from the castle library, and the silver pendant she always wore. Tears streamed down her face as the full weight of her humiliation crashed over her. She had been foolish to ever hope, foolish to believe that the friendship she and Marcus had shared as children meant anything at all. She was nobody. She had always been nobody. As she clutched the pendant in her trembling hand, something strange happened. The metal grew warm against her palm, then hot. A soft silver light began to emanate from the intricate design, growing brighter with each passing second. Arya gasped, trying to pull the chain over her head, but it wouldn't budge. The light intensified, filling the room with an otherworldly glow. She felt heat spreading through her veins like liquid fire, not painful but transformative, as if every cell in her body was awakening after a long sleep. Memories that weren't hers flooded her mind, a magnificent kingdom of silver towers, a woman who looked like her wearing a crown, a massacre in the dead of night, a desperate escape with a crying infant. The pendant pulsed one final time, and the light exploded outward, shattering the window and knocking over furniture. When the brightness faded, Arya found herself kneeling on the floor, gasping for breath. But something had changed. She could feel it, a power thrumming beneath her skin, ancient and vast, like an ocean she had never known existed. The mysterious stranger. A knock at her door made her jump. Before she could respond, the door opened, revealing a man she had never seen before. He was tall and imposing, dressed in black leather and a long dark cloak. His silver hair was pulled back from a face that was both beautiful and dangerous, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. Finally, the stranger said, his voice deep and resonant. The seal has broken. Arya scrambled backward, pressing herself against the wall. Who are you? How did you get past the guards? The man smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Guards cannot stop someone like me, child. I've been watching you for years, waiting for this moment. He gestured to the pendant still glowing faintly against her chest. Waiting for you to awaken. I don't understand, Arya said, her voice shaking. What's happening to me? The stranger stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. My name is Damien Nightfall, and I am the exiled Duke of the kingdom that was destroyed 22 years ago. The kingdom your family ruled before they were betrayed and murdered in their sleep. Arya's blood ran cold. That's impossible. I'm just a maid. I'm nobody. You are far from nobody, Princess Ariana Nightfall, Damien said, his voice soft but filled with steel. You are the last surviving heir of the royal bloodline, the daughter of King Eldrick and Queen Seraphina. And the power awakening inside you right now is your birthright, the magic of the Nightfall dynasty, one of the most powerful forces in the realm. Arya shook her head, unable to process his words. No. There must be some mistake. Damien reached into his cloak and pulled out a portrait painted on aged canvas. He held it up to the light, and Arya's breath caught in her throat. The woman in the painting could have been her twin, the same violet eyes, the same silver blonde hair, the same delicate features. She wore a crown of midnight stones and a gown that seemed woven from starlight. Beside her stood a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, and in the woman's arms was a baby girl wearing a tiny silver pendant. Your mother gave you that necklace the night she died, Damien said quietly. It was enchanted to suppress your powers, to hide you from those who would seek to kill you. She died protecting you, as did your father and every loyal member of your court. Tears blurred Arya's vision as memories continued to surface, fragments of a life she had forgotten, a childhood stolen from her. Who killed them? She whispered. Damien's expression darkened. That is a question with a complicated answer, one that involves the very kingdom you've been serving all these years. He extended his hand toward her. Come with me, princess. Let me take you somewhere safe, somewhere I can teach you to control your powers and reveal the truth about what happened to your family. Let me help you become who you were always meant to be. Arya looked at his outstretched hand, then at the shattered window, then down at her servant's dress stained with champagne and blood. Prince Marcus had thrown her away like garbage. The castle had never been her home, it had been her prison. But she was not the broken, powerless girl they believed her to be. She was Princess Ariana Nightfall, and her story was just beginning. Arya took Damien's hand, feeling the power surge through her veins. Take me away from here, she said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. Teach me everything. As they disappeared into the night, leaving the castle behind, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows, Prince Marcus, his face twisted with confusion and something that looked dangerously like regret. Part 2, Rise from the Ashes. The Hidden Sanctuary. Arya had expected many things when she fled the castle with Damien Nightfall, but she had not expected this. Deep in the Shadowpine forest, hidden behind layers of magical barriers that would repel any ordinary traveler, stood the Sanctuary of Twilight, the last refuge of the Nightfall loyalists. The compound was built into the side of a mountain, its architecture a breathtaking blend of natural stone and elegant design. Silver veins ran through the dark rock, glowing faintly with residual magic. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliff face, their mist creating permanent rainbows in the filtered sunlight that somehow penetrated the dense forest canopy. As Damien led her through the main gates, Arya was greeted by the sight of dozens of people, men and women of all ages, dressed in the traditional colors of the Nightfall Kingdom, silver, black, and deep midnight blue. They stopped their activities to stare at her, and one by one, they began to kneel. Rise, Damien commanded. Our princess has returned, but she does not yet understand the weight of her crown. Give her time. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached, tears streaming down her weathered face. You look just like your mother, she whispered, reaching out to touch Arya's cheek. Queen Seraphina was the most beautiful soul I ever knew. I served as her lady-in-waiting until the night of the massacre. What happened that night? Arya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, I need to know. The woman exchanged glances with Damien, who nodded slowly. Come, princess, she said. Let us take you to the Hall of Memories. It's time you learned the truth about your heritage and the betrayal that destroyed everything your parents built. The terrible truth. The Hall of Memories was a circular chamber lit by floating orbs of magical light. The walls were covered in murals depicting the history of the Nightfall Kingdom, a realm of prosperity, justice, and powerful magic that had stood for over 1,000 years. Damien stood beside a large table covered in old documents, maps, and portraits. His expression was grave as he began to speak. 22 years ago, your kingdom was the most powerful in the realm. Your father, King Aldrich, ruled with wisdom and compassion. Your mother, Queen Seraphina, was a sorceress of extraordinary ability. She could heal the sick, control the elements, and see glimpses of possible futures. You inherited her gifts, princess, along with your father's strategic mind. He gestured to a map showing 5 kingdoms. The realm was divided among 5 ruling families, each with their own territory. The Nightfalls ruled the central kingdom, maintaining balance and peace among the others. But there were those who envied your family's power, who believed that magic such as yours was too dangerous to exist. The Ashfords, Arya breathed, the name falling from her lips with sudden certainty. Damien's eyes widened. Your memories are returning. Yes, Duke Robert Ashford, Lady Victoria's grandfather, led the conspiracy. He convinced the other kingdoms that your family's magic was a threat that needed to be eliminated. He claimed your mother's prophecies gave you unfair advantages, that your father was planning to conquer the other kingdoms. The elderly woman, who had introduced herself as Lady Helena, continued the story. It was all lies, of course. But fear is a powerful weapon. On the night of the spring festival, when your parents had opened the castle to celebrate with the people, assassins struck. They poisoned the guards, set fire to the castle, and slaughtered anyone who stood in their way. Arya felt sick. And my parents? They fought with everything they had, Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. I was captain of the royal guard then. Your father ordered me to take you and flee while he and your mother held off the attackers. The last thing I saw before I carried you into the secret passages was your mother standing in a circle of silver fire, her magic blazing like a star, buying us precious seconds to escape. Tears streamed down Arya's face. Why don't I remember any of this? Your mother cast a final spell, Lady Helena explained gently. She sealed your memories and your powers, making you appear completely ordinary. It was the only way to keep you safe. The Ashfords were hunting for survivors, and a baby with violet eyes and powerful magic would have been an easy target. But why did you leave me at Eldenmore Castle? Arya asked, confusion and anger mixing in her voice. That's Ashford territory now. You left me with my family's murderers. Damien's jaw clenched. I had no choice. I was wounded and being pursued. I managed to reach the castle gates before I collapsed. King Edward of Eldenmore found you crying beside my unconscious body. He was a friend of your father and had no part in the conspiracy, though he was powerless to oppose the Ashfords openly. He took you in, and I barely escaped with my life. King Edward protected you in the only way he could, Lady Helena added. He made you a servant so you would be beneath the notice of visiting nobles. The Ashfords checked the castle several times over the years, looking for any trace of Nightfall survivors, but they never suspected the small maid with her head bowed. Arya's mind reeled with the implications. Prince Marcus, does he know? Edward died when Marcus was 16, Damien said. I doubt he ever told his son the truth about your identity. Marcus has grown up believing the official story, that the Nightfalls were dangerous sorcerers who threatened the stability of the realm and were justly removed from power. The betrayal cut even deeper now. Not only had Marcus rejected her, but his entire kingdom was built on the ashes of her family's murder. The training begins. Over the following weeks, Arya threw herself into training with an intensity that surprised even Damien. The power that had been sealed inside her for 22 years was now free, but it was wild and unpredictable. She needed to learn control before she could even think about confronting her enemies. Lady Helena taught her the history and customs of the Nightfall court, preparing her to reclaim her role as princess. She learned diplomacy, strategy, and the intricate politics that governed the 5 kingdoms. But it was Damien who trained her in combat and magic. Your mother's power was defensive, he explained as they stood in the training courtyard, surrounded by protective barriers. She could shield, heal, and protect. But you, princess, have inherited something more. Your magic is both creation and destruction, light and shadow. You are the balance your mother maintained made manifest. Arya raised her hands, and silver fire danced between her fingers. With a thought, she could make it burn hot enough to melt stone, or cool enough to provide gentle warmth. She could create shields of solid light that nothing could penetrate, or summon shadows that swallowed sound and sight. Damien taught her to fight with swords, daggers, and her bare hands. Magic is powerful, he said as they sparred, their blades ringing in the mountain air, but it can be depleted or countered. You must be deadly without it as well. She trained until her muscles screamed, until her magic reserves were exhausted, until she collapsed each night too tired to dream. And every morning, she woke up stronger. As the weeks turned to months, Arya transformed. The thin, frightened maid disappeared, replaced by a warrior princess with confidence in every movement. Her silver blonde hair grew longer, flowing down her back like a waterfall. Her violet eyes, once downcast, now blazed with determination and power. But what surprised her most was her growing connection with Damien. He was patient when she struggled, encouraging when she wanted to give up, and fierce when she needed to be pushed beyond her limits. At night, they would sit by the fire in the great hall, and he would tell her stories about her parents, helping her piece together the life that had been stolen from her. "Your father loved your mother more than anything," Damien said one evening, staring into the flames. "When they married, he was an alpha male king from a warrior lineage, and she was a sorceress princess from a peaceful realm. Everyone said it would never work, that they were too different. But they proved them all wrong. They balanced each other perfectly." Arya watched the firelight play across his scarred face. "Were you in love with her? My mother?" Damien was quiet for a long moment. Half the kingdom was in love with Queen Seraphina. She had that effect on people. But she only ever had eyes for your father. He turned to look at Arya, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You have her beauty, but your strength is your own. You're going to be an extraordinary queen, Ariana." The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, but before either could say more, a guard burst into the hall. "My lord. Princess. We've received word from our spies in the capital. Prince Marcus is to be married to Lady Victoria Ashford in 3 weeks. All the noble houses will be in attendance for the ceremony. It's the perfect opportunity to make our move," Arya finished, rising to her feet. Silver fire danced in her eyes. It's time they learned that the Nightfall line did not die in that massacre. It's time to go home. The grand return. The royal ball before Prince Marcus's wedding was the social event of the decade. Every noble family in the realm had gathered at the capital, their carriages clogging the streets as they arrived at the newly renovated palace of Eldon Moor. Lady Victoria had spared no expense in demonstrating the power and wealth of the Ashford-Stirling alliance. The ballroom glittered with 10,000 candles, the tables groaned under the weight of exotic delicacies, and the guest list included royalty from neighboring kingdoms. Marcus stood on the dais, resplendent in his ceremonial uniform, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. He had been distracted for months, ever since the night he had banished Arya. He told himself it was guilt, nothing more. He had acted harshly, driven by Victoria's expectations and his own pride. But sometimes, late at night, he remembered a little girl with violet eyes who had made him laugh when the weight of his crown felt too heavy. He remembered promises made under an oak tree, promises he had broken without a second thought. "You look pensive, darling," Victoria said, appearing at his elbow in a gown of emerald green that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. "This should be the happiest night of your life." "Of course," Marcus replied automatically. "I'm just thinking about the kingdom, the responsibilities ahead." Victoria's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, the herald's voice rang out across the ballroom. Announcing Her Royal Highness, Princess Ariana Nightfall of the House of Shadows, accompanied by Duke Damien Nightfall. The ballroom fell silent. Every head turned toward the entrance. And there, standing at the top of the grand staircase, was a vision that made Marcus's heart stop. Arya descended the stairs in a gown of liquid silver that seemed to be woven from moonlight itself. Her silver blonde hair was crowned with a delicate circlet of black diamonds, and her violet eyes blazed with an inner light that was both beautiful and terrifying. She moved with the grace of a queen, power radiating from her with every step. But it was her smile, cold, knowing, and utterly confident, that sent chills down Marcus's spine. Beside her walked Damien, dressed in the formal attire of a Nightfall duke, his hand resting protectively on the hilt of his sword. The crowd parted before them like water, nobles stumbling over themselves to get out of the way. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Nightfall? But they were all killed. She looks like the old queen. Impossible, this must be some kind of trick. Arya and Damien reached the center of the ballroom, directly in front of the dais where Marcus and Victoria stood frozen in shock. Prince Marcus, Arya said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. Lady Victoria. How kind of you to invite me to your celebration. Victoria recovered first, her face twisting with fury. You dare show your face here, you treacherous maid? Guards. Seize her immediately. But the guards didn't move. They couldn't. Arya had raised one hand, and silver light pulsed from her palm, freezing every guard in the room in place. I am not a maid, Arya said softly, dangerously. I am Princess Ariana Nightfall, rightful heir to the Kingdom of Shadows, daughter of King Aldrich and Queen Seraphina, who were murdered by traitors 22 years ago. She turned her gaze to the crowd, making sure every noble present heard her words. For 2 decades, I lived in this very castle, serving the family that destroyed mine, cleaning the floors while the descendants of my parents' murderers walked over me. But no more. Marcus finally found his voice. Arya, this is madness. The Nightfalls were. Were what? Arya interrupted, taking a step toward him. Were dangerous? Were a threat? Tell me, Marcus, did you learn that from the history books written by the Ashfords? The same family that organized the massacre of innocent people, including a 1-year-old child? She raised her hands, and the air around her began to shimmer. Images appeared in the air like ghostly projections, scenes from the night of the massacre. The nobles watched in horror as they saw assassins slaughtering castle servants, as they saw Duke Robert Ashford himself directing the attack, as they saw Queen Seraphina's final stand. This is the truth the Ashfords have hidden for 22 years, Arya declared. They murdered my family and stole my kingdom because they feared our power. And they have been hunting for survivors ever since. Victoria's face had gone white. These are lies. Illusions created by dark magic. Are they? Damien asked, stepping forward. He pulled out a document sealed with the official crest of the Ashford family. This is a letter signed by your grandfather, Robert Ashford, detailing the plan to eliminate the Nightfall line. We recovered it from the ruins of your family's summer estate, along with several dozen other incriminating documents. The room erupted in chaos. Nobles began shouting questions, accusations flying back and forth. Some moved toward the exits, sensing that a political earthquake was about to reshape the entire realm. Marcus stared at Arya, his world tilting beneath his feet. Is this true? Were you really, all this time, you were? Yes, Arya said, meeting his gaze. I was the princess you should have protected. Instead, you threw me away like I was nothing. You chose your pride, your perfect noble bride, your comfortable lies over the truth. Her eyes hardened. That was your choice, Marcus. Now live with it. She turned away from him, addressing the crowd once more. I have returned to reclaim my throne and my kingdom. The Nightfall line will not be erased from history. And those responsible for my family's murder will face justice. You can't just walk in here and demand a kingdom. Victoria shrieked, losing all composure. You're nobody. You have no army, no allies, no proof. Arya smiled, and it was a terrifying expression. On the contrary, Lady Victoria, I have something far more powerful than armies. She raised both hands, and the silver fire that had been dancing around her fingertips exploded outward, filling the ballroom with light. The nobles cried out, shielding their eyes, but the fire didn't burn. Instead, it transformed the room. The walls shimmered and changed, showing images of the old Nightfall kingdom in all its glory, the silver towers, the thriving cities, the happy people. And then, overlaying everything, appeared the ghostly figures of thousands upon thousands of warriors, all wearing the crest of the Nightfall house. "I have the loyalty of every surviving member of my family's court," Arya declared. "I have the ancient magic of my bloodline. And I have the truth. The Ashford's reign of lies ends tonight." An explosion rocked the palace. The windows shattered, and through the broken glass, everyone could see fires burning in the city below. The Nightfall forces, hidden for 22 years, had begun their assault. But before anyone could react, a new figure appeared in the doorway, an assassin dressed in black, moving with supernatural speed. In his hand was a crossbow, and it was aimed directly at Arya's heart. The assassin fired. Time seemed to slow as the poisoned bolt flew through the air. Arya raised her hand to deflect it, but she was a fraction of a second too slow. Then Damien was there, throwing himself in front of her. The bolt meant for Arya's heart buried itself in his shoulder instead. "No!" Arya screamed as Damien collapsed. She caught him, lowering him to the ground as silver fire erupted from her body in a wave of fury. The assassin was incinerated before he could even scream. "You fool," Arya whispered, her hands glowing as she tried to heal the wound. But the poison was already spreading, black veins crawling up Damien's neck. "Why did you do that?" Damien smiled weakly, reaching up to touch her face. "Because you're worth saving, princess. You always have been." His eyes began to close. "Finish what we started. Make them pay. And when you sit on your throne, remember that someone believed in you when you were nobody. Don't you dare die on me," Arya commanded, tears streaming down her face as she poured all her power into him. "I need you, Damien." She stopped, realizing the truth of her own words. Somewhere during the months of training, of late-night conversations, of building a future together, she had fallen for the man who had saved her life and given her back her identity. The silver fire around her hands turned golden, mixing with something deeper, not just magic, but pure emotion, pure will. The poison began to retreat, driven back by a force even more powerful than the assassin's deadly craft. Damien's eyes snapped open, now glowing with the same golden light. The bond between them had awakened something ancient, something that hadn't been seen since the first Nightfall rulers united their kingdom through love and magic. Marcus watched from the dais, his heart breaking as he realized what he was witnessing. Arya had found what he had thrown away: true partnership, true power, true love. And he had chosen Victoria instead, chosen political convenience over the girl who had always seen him as more than just a crown. As Damien sat up, fully healed, Arya helped him to his feet. Together, they turned to face the assembled nobles, and in that moment, everyone in the room knew that the realm would never be the same. "This is not over," Victoria hissed, backing toward the exit. "The Ashfords have resources you cannot imagine. We will destroy you." "You're welcome to try," Arya replied calmly. "But first, you'll have to answer to the Council of Kings for your family's crimes. I've already sent evidence to every neighboring kingdom. By morning, the Ashford name will be synonymous with treason." As Victoria fled, dragging a shell-shocked Marcus with her, Arya turned to address the remaining nobles. "A new era begins tonight," she declared. "The kingdom of shadows rises from the ashes. And those who stand with me will be rewarded. Those who stand against me." She let the threat hang in the air, silver fire dancing around her crown. The choice was clear. One by one, the nobles began to kneel, pledging their loyalty to the returned princess. And in the chaos of that fateful night, as kingdoms began to fall and new alliances were forged, Arya looked at Damien and knew that the hardest battle still lay ahead. But she was ready. The maid had become a queen. And queens did not beg for mercy. They conquered. Part 3, The Queen's Vengeance. The Hunt for Truth. 3 days after the disastrous ball, the realm was in chaos. Arya had seized control of the Nightfall ancestral lands, and thousands of loyalists who had been hiding in plain sight for 2 decades emerged from the shadows to pledge their allegiance. The silver banners of the House of Shadows flew once more over the rebuilt capital city of Lunaris. But Arya knew that reclaiming her kingdom was only the beginning. Victoria Ashford had disappeared, along with the crucial evidence that would prove the family's involvement in the royal massacre to the satisfaction of the Council of Kings. Without concrete proof, the other kingdoms remained neutral, unwilling to take sides in what they saw as a power struggle between two noble houses. Arya stood in the newly restored throne room, studying maps of the realm spread across a massive table. Damien worked beside her, his shoulder fully healed thanks to her magic, marking the locations of known Ashford strongholds. "They'll be fortifying their position," Damien said, his finger tracing the northern territories. "The Ashford family controls 3 of the 5 kingdoms through marriage and political alliance. They're hoping to rally the council against you before you can solidify your claim." "Let them try," Arya replied, but her confidence was tempered by reality. She had magic and passion, but the Ashfords had spent 2 decades building an empire on the graves of her family. "We need that evidence, Damien. The original documents, not copies. Something they can't dismiss as forgeries." Lady Helena entered the throne room, her expression grave. "Your Majesty, we've received troubling news. Prince Marcus has requested a private audience. He's outside the gates with only a small honor guard, requesting safe passage under the banner of truce." Arya's hands clenched on the edge of the table. She hadn't seen Marcus since the ball, since the moment he'd watched her reclaim her identity and walked away with Victoria. Part of her wanted to refuse, to send him away with the same cold dismissal he'd shown her. But curiosity, and something more complicated, made her hesitate. Let him in, she decided. But search him thoroughly. "I won't risk assassination in my own hall." Damien's jaw tightened. "Ariana, is that wise? He's aligned with the Ashfords. This could be a trap." "Then I'll spring it and deal with the consequences," Arya replied. She met his concerned gaze and softened slightly. "I need to hear what he has to say. I need to look him in the eye and know, once and for all, where his loyalties lie." The prince's confession. Marcus entered the throne room looking nothing like the confident prince who had banished her months ago. His uniform was rumpled, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he walked with the bearing of a man carrying an unbearable weight. He stopped at the base of the dais where Arya sat on the obsidian throne of her ancestors, her silver crown glinting in the light of 100 candles. Damien stood at her right hand, one hand resting on his sword, his message clear: "Threaten the queen, and you die." "Princess Ariana," Marcus said, his voice rough. "Or should I say, Your Majesty? I've come to—" "You'll address her as Queen Ariana," Damien interrupted coldly. "She has reclaimed her birthright. Show proper respect." Marcus flinched but nodded. "Queen Ariana, I've come to beg your forgiveness and to offer you information that may help in your fight against the Ashfords." Arya leaned forward, her violet eyes searching his face. "Why? What has changed, Marcus? 3 days ago, you stood beside Victoria while she called me a liar and a pretender. Now you're here, talking about helping me? Forgive me if I'm skeptical." "Because I was a fool," Marcus said, and for the first time Arya heard genuine emotion in his voice. "Because I've spent the last 3 days learning truths that should have been obvious all along. And because—" He took a shaky breath. "Because I remember, Arya. I remember the little girl who used to meet me in the gardens. I remember the promises I made and broke. And I remember the look in your eyes when I threw you out into the snow." He dropped to his knees, a prince humbling himself before his former servant. "I was cruel. I was vain. I chose appearance over substance, political convenience over loyalty to someone who had shown me nothing but kindness. And I've been paying for that choice every day since." Pretty words, Damien growled. But words are cheap. What information do you claim to have? Marcus reached into his jacket slowly, pulling out a sealed document. After the ball, Victoria changed. She became paranoid, convinced that you had spies everywhere. She ordered her guards to burn all evidence of the Ashford conspiracy. But she didn't know that my father kept his own records, hidden in a place only the royal family knew about. He held up the document. This is my father's personal journal from 22 years ago. In it, he details everything: how Duke Robert Ashford approached him with the plan to eliminate the Nightfalls, how my father refused to participate, how the Ashfords threatened to kill me if he interfered. He knew about the massacre, Arya. He knew, and he was powerless to stop it. That's why he took you in, why he protected you the only way he could. Arya felt her breath catch. King Edward had been kind to her, in his distant way. He'd been the one to ensure she was fed, clothed, and educated, privileges uncommon for servants. She'd always wondered why. He wrote about you, Marcus continued, his voice breaking. About how you reminded him of Queen Seraphina, about how keeping you safe was his way of atoning for his cowardice. And he made me promise, on his deathbed, to protect you. I broke that promise. I broke it because I was too blind, too proud, too stupid to see what was right in front of me. He set the journal on the floor and slid it toward the throne. This journal contains dates, names, and details of the conspiracy, including the location of the Ashfords' private vault where they keep